Chapter 8: Focal Points. Have you ever seen someone point their torso, feet, or shoulders toward a specific person? Our minds naturally create centers of attention, allowing us to observe certain people more closely and become increasingly aware of their presence, conversations, and vocabulary. This creates a form of passive intimacy where individuals may subconsciously use vocal mirroring and proximity to seek validation or gauge interest. Focal points are not only physical but also digital. In other words, individuals may use social media to follow another person's activity and online presence. However, this may evolve into limerence and chronic mental looping, distracting someone from creating their own happiness due to an established dependency. When combined with peripheral monitoring, a crush's friends, social circle, and trusted individuals may become more aware of a person's sadness, jealousy, desperation, agitation, ego, or vulnerability. This is known as emotional contagion or neural synchrony. These terms describe the brain's capability of forging subconscious links between our emotional states. In other words, we may begin matching our crush's actions without even realizing it. This is a natural response when we establish a focal point and develop crush chemistry. But how are focal points established in the first place? Let's begin with the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion, is a type of cognitive bias in which someone encounters a focal object for the first time and suddenly begins seeing it everywhere. It could be a person who becomes the center of our attention, a voice, a name, a color, or even a piece of clothing. This phenomenon encompasses both selective attention and confirmation bias. According to Psychology Today, a man named Terry Mullen reported encountering references to the Baader-Meinhof gang, also known as the Red Army faction, twice within a 24-hour period. Because of this unusual experience, he wrote to a Minnesota newspaper in 1994 describing the phenomenon. His account later contributed to the popularization of the term Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, which is now commonly used to describe the frequency illusion. It was surprising because a West German militant organization had suddenly seemed to appear repeatedly in his daily life. The first concept behind this phenomenon is selective attention. Selective attention occurs when someone becomes more attentive to manifestations of a focal point, while filtering out information that appears irrelevant. In a crush context, when an individual begins the Lyman's loop by looking at someone from afar, that person gradually registers as a focal point. Over time, This may distract an individual's mind as they begin depending on another person for their happiness. This may fuel one's ego and contribute to avoidant or push or pull behaviors that leave someone paralyzed by their own shyness. The second concept is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for information that is consistent with our original beliefs, while disregarding information that contradicts them. In crush dynamics, this behavior reflects how we often search for our crush's presence in familiar environments or locations where we expect them to be. In doing so, we focus heavily on moments that reinforce our feelings, creating self satisfaction rather than genuine mutual respect. On the other hand, we may experience what I call organic scarcity during their absence. This type of scarcity refers to the limited amount of attention or presence we receive from them. When we begin reducing someone to a source of validation rather than appreciating them as a complete person, attraction can become one sided and emotionally unhealthy. Now that we understand how focal points become established, we can examine how attraction influences communication itself. Howard Giles, a British American social psychologist, developed the Communication Accommodation Theory, also known as vocal accommodation. This theory explains why individuals adjust their communication styles during social interactions to increase social closeness or fit into social groups. If we look at the way we interact with formal groups such as schools, business establishments, or offices, informal groups like social friend groups, and familial groups, we may reconsider the colloquialism, volume, or tone that we use in everyday life. These adjustments generally fall into three categories: convergence, divergence, and maintenance. So, what is convergence? Convergence occurs when individuals adapt their communication style to become more similar to the person they are interacting with. In crush dynamics, this explains the psychology behind vocal mirroring. We may begin adopting aspects of another person's vocabulary, interests, and communication patterns to become more similar to them. This allows individuals to build rapport, gain approval, and show empathy. On the other hand, divergence, which is the opposite of convergence, occurs when someone intentionally maintains social distance by changing their formality or tone. This may help preserve cultural identity, establish boundaries, or express disapproval. We often behave differently around friends than we do around teachers, employers, or strangers because trust and familiarity have already been established. Finally, we have maintenance. Maintenance occurs when an individual persists in their original communication style, regardless of how the other person behaves. This may establish neutrality, assert individuality, or demonstrate authenticity. Sometimes People develop crushes because they admire another person's confidence, authenticity, or self care. They may seek validation, emotional connection, or simply appreciate someone who appears comfortable being themselves. Communication, however, is not the only factor that shapes attraction. Our perceptions matter too. This brings us to the halo effect. The halo effect is a cognitive bias in which one positive characteristic influences our overall perception of another person's abilities, personality, and morality. Research suggests that our brains can form judgments about another person within milliseconds. This demonstrates how quickly impressions develop. When we observe positive traits in someone, we often assume they possess other unrelated positive traits such as intelligence, kindness, or emotional maturity. In crush dynamics whatsoever, this can encourage daydreaming and idealization, creating a version of a person that exists more in fantasy than reality. In my opinion, clarity and acceptance of another person's flaws help restore a more realistic perspective. Relationships also deepen through self disclosure. In 1973, social psychologists Erwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor became interested in discovering how individuals become psychologically close. They developed the social penetration theory, which uses the image of an onion to explain relationship development. Breadth refers to the variety of topics people discuss, while depth refers to the intimacy of a person's thoughts, feelings, and relationships with others. According to Altman and Taylor, relationships generally progress through four stages: orientation, exploratory affective exchange, and stable exchange. During the orientation stage, individuals engage in small talk and maintain formality. This is when we begin to form what's known as an acquaintance. During the exploratory stage, people begin revealing more of their personality and opinions while remaining relatively comfortable and low risk. This is where casual friendships begin to bloom. During the effective stage, people become comfortable sharing private fears, hopes, and vulnerabilities while offering reassurance and support. Here, people begin to have BFFs or romantic relationships. Finally, in the stable exchange stage, both individuals understand each other's inner cores, flaws, and patterns of behavior, allowing them to share their deepest emotions and life goals. This is where intimacy reaches its deepest core. Attraction is not always conscious. Before your conscious mind fully recognizes that you are attracted to someone, your brain may already be influencing subtle behaviors that draw your attention toward them. This is known as limbic synchrony, a term describing how individuals become increasingly responsive to another person's emotions and behaviors. For instance, One may attempt to distract themselves by doing work online to appear busy, yet their body language may reveal their focus by subconsciously pointing their torso, feet, or shoulders toward a focal point. Someone may also become increasingly attentive to another person's vocabulary, speech patterns, and expressions without realizing it. As former FBI Joe Navarro once stated, we are constantly transmitting information through our clothing, grooming, posture, and behavior. Nonverbal communication influences social interactions, attraction, and our perception of confidence and respect. He is essentially describing how individuals have control over how they present themselves to others through appearance or behavior. In doing so, he stated how nonverbal communication has an influence on our social interactions, lifestyle, and attraction, allowing us to create a social image of respect and confidence. Similarly, Navarro describes arm crossing as a self soothing behavior that involves comforting oneself when distressed. Although many people interpret crossed arms as closed body language, this assumption may overlook the actual emotional state of the individual. Based on personal observations, my crush often performs this behavior, which I interpret as a possible response to emotional overwhelm, pride, or discomfort, although other explanations may exist. Likewise, we often misinterpret facial expressions. Bear with me with this one. The resting bitch face is a neutral and relaxed facial expression that people frequently mistake for contempt, annoyance, or disapproval. In crush dynamics, it may sometimes be interpreted as a mask or defense mechanism to hide extreme agitation or nervousness. In other words, our brains tend to see someone's outward aloofness without measuring the depth of the inside. However, this does not guarantee attraction if there are no additional cues such as consistent eye contact or preening. So why do we have this? Very well. The resting bitch face may reflect learned social expectations, emotional restraint, or an attempt to manage how one is perceived by others. Some individuals may appear emotionally distant or difficult to read, resulting in a runner or chaser dynamic in crush situations. Our perceptions can also be influenced by colors. Red has long symbolized love and romanticism. We often associate it with roses, passion, urgency, power, and even danger. Researchers have also suggested that red influences human behavior and perception. Because red is visually striking and associated with emotional intensity, it naturally attracts attention and encourages self expression. When discussing adolescents, their fashion allows them to stand out, which contributes to feelings of excitement, confidence, and self expression. Another fascinating idea is scopaesthesia, also known as the psychic staring effect. Scopaesthesia is the proposed phenomenon in which someone feels that they are being watched from outside their normal field of vision. However, it has not been scientifically proven and may occur due to coincidence, selective memory, or superstition. Even so, many people can relate to the sensation of suddenly feeling aware of another person's presence before directly seeing them. I can personally relate to this experience, as there were moments when I felt unusually aware of my crush's presence before any direct interaction occurred. She reminded me of my best friend because of her facial features, although she appeared more timid and reserved. But finally, attraction is often influenced by certain behavioral traits. Let's take a look at each trait. There are numerous ways that people become attracted to others, including intelligence and wit. When people engage in social discussions, debate different perspectives, or contribute new ideas, this can trigger emotional closeness. On the other hand, someone who shows empathy and engages in active communication with other peers or co-workers demonstrates strong social intelligence, while those who create banter demonstrate the ability to find humor. Altogether, this shows that wit and intelligence, when expressed with humility, allow an individual to be reliable and engaging in a relationship. And then we have confidence, competence, and authenticity. Confidence may also spark attraction because it signals emotional security, social value, and resilience. Bragging and arrogance both lower one's perceived social value because they may demonstrate a lack of empathy and emotional maturity towards others. When we are capable of carrying ourselves and relying on our own happiness, it allows us to attract people and make them feel seen in both platonic and romantic relationships. Competence, on the other hand, is a valuable trait because we observe someone who knows what they're doing and who is capable of solving problems. In crush dynamics, we often look for partners who can help us survive and thrive. When an individual is competent, they can help handle resources, secure goals, and overcome daily anomalies while fostering growth and shared interests that challenge both individuals to improve. Authenticity is demonstrated by being the best version of yourself. When people understand their own goals, emotions, and abilities without establishing a comparison between themselves and society's repetitive trends, they become individuals who make them decisions and create success despite being pressured or criticized. Being authentic does not only mean being ourselves. It requires us to stop seeking validation from other people and stop creating superficial social masks that hide our inner feelings. We must embrace our imperfections and give others the opportunity to experience our flaws. Because in the end, this builds trust and a sense of warmth and comfort. A flawed society plays push or pull games only to lose the person they truly had a crush on. Real attraction starts when both individuals experience peace, reciprocity, and mutual respect without manipulating the other's autonomy, freedom, or self respect. However, focus also plays an important role. Focus is not only centered on vision or one's line of sight, but also on our ability to give our partners the attention they deserve. It is intentional and uninterrupted, meaning that both individuals give each other the attention and emotional intimacy they deserve without constant distractions or third party involvement. Partners in a relationship do not necessarily manipulate each other or force each other to give up their ambitions or individuality. Instead, they prioritize connection by identifying the flaws in a relationship and actively seeking ways to compromise. However, too much focus can lead to codependency or burnout, which may cause an individual to become detached from their intended goals, boundaries, or identity. A balance between self respect and mutual companionship may create a long lasting bond in both platonic and romantic relationships. Modern behaviors such as bookmarking and venting also reflect focal points. In social media, we often perceive bookmarking as a collection of stories, posts, or reels saved for later viewing. In crush dynamics, however, bookmarking may become a subtle method of tracking an individual's life without having to break the ice. Of course, this behavior is often used by people who have a crush and want to secretly admire someone from afar. However, this does not necessarily apply to everyone because people may also bookmark posts to revisit information, preserve memories, or use content for educational purposes. Attraction can get really overwhelming over time. We tend to freely express our frustrations or agitation to a trusted friend or group of friends, whether about mixed emotions or unrequited feelings toward a crush. This is called venting. It creates emotional release and allows us to get things off our chest. However, excessive venting without seeking clarity or resolution may amplify negative emotions and encourage overanalysis. Without direct clarity, the relationship or situationship may remain stagnant, allowing an idealized focal point to persist. For the purpose of this series, I use the term focal alignment to describe the subconscious orientation of the body toward a focal point. Focal alignment refers to the subconscious orientation of the body that involves observing the direction of the torso, feet, and shoulders toward a focal point of attention as indicators of interest, engagement, or attentiveness. There are three types of directional categories. The first one, we have ventral alignment. The word ventral refers to the front or belly side of an organism. The belly button rule suggests that a person's navel may point toward their focal object. Wherever the belly button points, The individual may subconsciously redirect their attention toward the person in whom they are most interested or engaged. Then we have pedal alignment. Oftentimes, the feet are considered the most honest indicators of attention and engagement because people rarely control their feet orientation consciously. Whenever they point to a specific person, they may demonstrate directed attention or interest. When paired with mirroring and other cues, this may suggest interest and the presence of a focal point. Then the third one is shoulder alignment. It is possible that when a person talks to someone else, their shoulders may point towards that person's line of sight, either sideways or directly facing them. In doing so, some individuals may glance over their shoulder to check if you are looking at them. Others may perform this cue to present a more open and vulnerable posture or subtly invite social interaction. Finally, there are moments when attention suddenly intensifies. According to Diederich, an extinction burst refers to a temporary increase in behavior after previously reinforced actions no longer receive the expected response or reward. In crush dynamics, this may appear as persistent attention-seeking behaviors, increased social media checking, or attempts to place oneself within another person's line of sight. As time flies, the crush may begin to feel overly exposed or overwhelmed. Hence, they may pull back and regain their own social energy by redirecting their attention towards other activities. When these efforts fail, individuals may sometimes experience what I call retrogradation. So, what is retrogradation? It is a term that describes progression or movement in a backward direction opposite to what is considered normal or customary. In crush dynamics, an individual may use previous communication tactics to trigger a reaction whenever they experience extinction burst and organic scarcity from their focal object. This may include revisiting old messages, frequently checking social media, intentionally placing themselves within the other person's line of sight, or repeating behaviors that once gained attention. Based on my interpretation, I believe that one may do this to restore a sense of familiarity they once had with the other party. They may also attempt to recover wounded pride or seek reassurance and validation from the person they admire. Without clarity or direct communication, retrogradation may prolong uncertainty and contribute to unhealthy dependency. In other words, an individual may gradually rely on the other person to take social risks and initiate interaction, sacrificing their own boundaries, integrity, or emotional energy, while waiting for reassurance or reciprocation. Overall, focal points remind us that attraction often begins with attention. The more our minds become fixated on a person, the more likely we are to notice their presence, interpret their behaviors, and emotionally invest in their existence. However, where our attention goes, our emotions often follow. Therefore, understanding focal points may help us appreciate attraction while also maintaining our boundaries, individuality, and emotional well being. In Chapter 9, we will combine all of our case studies and tie them back to my experience of having a crush during my senior year. I will also use this narrative as an opportunity to teach adolescents how to navigate their first crushes. At the same time, I will explain the logic behind the double attraction paradox. As a side note, if you ever have a crush on someone, please try to reach them out. And if someone tries to do that to you, please do make an effort to respond. You never know how difficult it may have been for that person to send that message in the first place. Without some form of clarity, their courage and effort may end in uncertainty or rejection. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.